is some somewhat new to what's happening there, but not new to the plight of the military, and 100% invested in your transition and in trying to build a bridge for his organization as well. So Dean and I just got an opportunity to meet. He's been doing his own onboarding and trial by fire. So he and I had a really good conversation the other day that stretched well beyond our initial half an hour. Dean, I'll turn it over to you. We blocked this time for you to address. So, I don't know how you want to schedule this. It's a very informal one-on-one-ish. This is not, anything we didn't schedule it as a lunch and learn. It was just a chance for you to share what's going on with your story first, which would be great. Just your own story, maybe 5-10 minutes, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, how you ended up there, and then what you're focused on now. And I think that would be awesome, brother. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Riley. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to, as it comes to transitioning veterans. I mean, it's at that time right now where, everything's going 20,000 different directions for you all. And I understand that. So just give you a little bit about my background. So I retired in 2017 after 30 years. I had over 30 years of service in the United States Army. I started off as, I always tell people, I started off as a Rambo my first 10 to 11 years, and then I changed over. I had an opportunity where I had someone come to me. I had no idea what they were doing. They came to me and said, "Hey, you'd be a great career counselor, for the Army." And I was like, "What the heck's a career counselor?" I had no idea what a career counselor was. And they're like, "Oh, we do all the retention stuff." And then, of course, at that time, go onto the recruiting platform. I was like, "Okay, well, that sounds interesting." And what was nice about that is that I was at that point of my career where I was thinking, what am I going to do when I get out? I mean, am I going to be doing this my whole life? And I actually transitioned into and did a reclassification into the MOS 79 Sierra for career counselor. And then so for the next 20 years, I've been in the talent acquisition, recruiting world, the retention world. Career counselors dealing with the transitions from the active component into the reserve component. And then around 2008, well, actually 2007 to 2008, we really started taking the step in dealing with the post 9/11 GI Bill, the transitioning of soldiers into the Soldier for Life as that changed. And it's one of those MOSs that really doesn't get a lot of credit because it's not officer led, it's enlisted led in the United States Army, which is very unique. It's the only profession in the United States Army that is enlisted led. And rightfully so, because you're dealing with a lot of enlisted soldiers at that time. And, there's no other better types of personalities and the backgrounds than having the enlisted leaders there. So I did that and went to the Sergeant Major's Academy back in 2006. And I ended up going to the 1st Armored Division in Germany. And then after that, I was selected to become in the pinnacle position for our field to work in the United States Pentagon on the Army side in the Pentagon. So I was there for 52 months. I always tell everybody I started on Inauguration Day of President Obama, which is actually factual. I signed in on that day in 2009, January 2009. Went through 52 months. And that was a very challenging time period because we were seeing a growth in the military forces, but also at the same time, towards the end, we started seeing a decrease of the military forces. And so I was working with a lot of the promotions and the Sergeant Major of the Army and the Undersecretary of Defense, working on how we were going to get our end strength at a certain level by X date. All while running the Army's retention program and the in-service recruitment program that is going on, writing regulations, dealing with Congress, working with the White House. Yes, I mean, all these big things that you're working on in the Pentagon, which is pretty interesting. 52 months, decided not to retire from there. Went to the Intelligence and Security Command at Fort Belvoir and did about 4 years there, and then I exited out. I said, okay, 30 years is enough. I don't need to do any more. It's a nice round number. I'm good to go. Long story short, with all of that, is that when I was working at the Pentagon, I actually started thinking about how I was going to transition out. So my transition was well before 24 months. I started mentally preparing myself at that time to think about how it's going to be when I get out. The benefit that I had was working in the Pentagon and working in a force that had a ton of civilians. Not that they were civilianized on the commercial front, they were still government employees, but to start thinking and talking to them about how it was when they transitioned out, but also get into that feel and into that mindset of what is it different? What's the difference between keeping the uniform on and having the uniform taken off? Then I go to the Intelligence Security Command, and not only you're working with uniforms, you're working with a whole bunch of different agencies, and no one's wearing uniforms. They're working in classified portfolios per se, and so it was very easy to understand the lingo that they're on because they're working contracts and they're working on the commercial fronts as well. And I started feeling like, okay, I think I can get this lingo down where I can start looking at my resume that I started setting up and looking at it in the sense of I need to civilianize this thing. And this is where I want to go to. So after 30 years and all this stuff and getting to this transition point, one of the biggest things that I was told, and one of the biggest things that I always recommend is always look at your resume. I mean, I know Bruno's looking at his resume probably right now. Bruno and I, we know each other over LinkedIn. And, but I'm going to use Bruno as an example. I'm sure he's looking at his resume, but if he didn't look at his resume this last weekend and take 10 minutes of his time and make a change to it or update it, he's probably wrong. Your resume, okay, is probably the most important thing that you need out there to have to put in front of a recruiter or a hiring manager. And that resume is not just your evaluation of what you've done in the military. It's not your evaluation report. You actually have to go into the weeds and talk about the specifics of what you have done. That was one of the most challenging things that I had to understand, was that I couldn't just copy and paste my evaluation reports and just put it on a piece of paper and assume that somebody on the other side would understand what I was doing. I would actually have to go into the details of that resume. And that's one of the challenging things, is that we say, hey, I'm an operations manager. Well, an operations manager in the United States military has 20,000 different definitions, because you could be an operation manager in a medical field, you can be an operations manager in an admin field, you can be an operations manager in a technical field, artillery, infantry, on a ship, wherever it may be. Out here in the civilian world, an operation manager has just as many different definitions. But you have to remember, it's about the context of what you've done in the military and the context of what you have done or want to do in the civilian world. Veterans have to understand it's not about the job titles. It's not about an operations manager, and I think I can do this other operation manager job out there. It's about looking at the responsibilities of what that job is that you want to do. That's the most important thing to look at. A lot of veterans look at the job title and say, hey, I want to be an HR specialist because that's what I've done. But the HR specialist in the civilian world may be working on different platforms than what you feel comfortable for or in, and therefore you're going to find it very challenging to move into that. The context means so much versus the job title. The context is what you're going to feel comfortable with, and more importantly, it's what the hiring manager is going to feel comfortable with you in doing. The context of your resume, okay, and when you're pursuing a job, it has to look like the palms of your hands. most of us, I believe all of us, are very fortunate to have two hands, unlike others that we know that may have lost a hand or two or something in there on the battlefield. But I want to use this as an example. When you look at your palms of your hands, you're going to see that you have all these lines and all these wrinkles and all these different, bending points because our hands are different sizes. And we have these different lines because of experience and things that we're working on. But this is what your resume needs to look like on this side. And the job that you're pursuing needs to look like this palm right here. So when you put it together, okay, it matches up. The most challenging thing out there is that veterans, they'll have a resume that's written like this, okay? And then the job they're going for looks like this. And they're not going to match up because you're not putting them palm on palm. I say this because I just got done over the weekend talking to two veterans. Last Friday, one, and none of them are coming to Adobe, the company that I work for right now. This is all just coaching 101 on how important it is to have the context of your resume to read and align with the job that you are going for, as long as you have those experience and skills. Because you're trying to look for that perfect marriage on paper. Because that perfect marriage on paper is what the recruiter is going to look at and say, you know what? Tina says that she has this skill, and that's exactly the skill that I'm looking for. She has this experience, and it says exactly that on her resume. And she has done A, B, and C, and my context to the requisition says exactly that. I have probably spoken to, just here at Adobe, just over 100 personnel already, and I've only been here for about 6 weeks, 5 weeks at Adobe. And it always comes down to the context of that resume. And I will look at the resume and I will ask, okay, so what are you shooting for? What stars are you shooting for out there? Well, I want to be this. Well, your resume doesn't say that. You have to get your resume to say what you want to do. Okay, that matches up with the job. So Lonnie, when you're putting your resume together and you want to be a business consultant or you want to be a business development representative, you need to look at the company or companies, okay, and look at what those criterias are and see if you have anything that's written like that on your resume. So when it says that you as a BDR, business development representative, and we want you to have the ability to understand complex business environments and have worked on customer issues with a certain product. And if your resume doesn't say anything along that line, that's an X. It may say something else that you may interpret that's what it's saying. But the words need to read the same. So Dusty, when you have your resume together and it says that you built a pipeline and the requirement says that you built a pipeline, or you have trained to build a pipeline, as you're getting right now with Riley and the team, right? And the requirement says experience of building a pipeline, you're being truthful because you have been trained. You have the credentials because of Salesforce. And now when that recruiter looks at it and says, hey, you have A, B, C, and D, and you don't have this, but you do have this, because I'm looking for somebody that can build a pipeline and you've been trained to build a pipeline for opportunities. Okay, we've got that. But if you don't have that key emphasis in there to match up with the job requirement on your resumes are not going to get looked at as if it matches up with something that they're looking for. Have you heard many times that people would say, you need to tailor your resume to the job that you're going for? Some head nods. The tailoring of the resume, the context of that resume that you have, has to be specific to one job, not two jobs, not three, to that one that you are trying to snag. Because the requirements from one job, regardless of the job title, remember that at the beginning, just regardless of the job title, the context of what they're looking for is going to be different. So if you want to be a BDR and Microsoft is saying specific things, and then Adobe says something else, and then Salesforce is different, you're going to have holistically a lot of key areas that are going to touch each other. But it's important to look at that job requirement to see what is missing that you don't have on your resume. Now, I've been doing this recruiting thing. When I left out of the Army in 2017, I was just shocked at how many recruiters just kind of just bypass resumes all day long. They're looking at resumes and they don't see through the resume. They don't look at the experience that could possibly come through that piece of paper. They're just looking straight on that piece of paper. They're not looking at the intangibles that are beyond that piece of paper. They're not looking through it to really dig in. You don't know what you don't know. But what you do know is the job that you're trying to go for is going to be posted online, and you can use that to your advantage. And you know that if you have the experience, it needs to be on your resume to match up and tailor it to that job. There's one thing that you cannot control. The most important thing that you cannot control is who the recruiter is that is reading your resume. You don't get to control that. And when I say the recruiter in this case here, not only is it the recruiter, it's the talent sourcer or the talent scout, it's the hiring manager, it's everyone within that recruiting engine. You don't get to decide who gets to read that. And more importantly, you don't get to decide how they interpret what they're reading. Have you ever read a news article? You can probably pick one up today. You can interpret it, Tika, you can interpret it completely different than the way that I'm reading it, right? You say, hey, there's a 60% chance of rain. That's what the weatherman says. No, I'm interpreting it that there's a 40% chance of it not raining. It's the same thing, but I interpret it differently. Tika's going to go out there and tell everybody, hey, it's going to rain today. And I'm going to go out there and tell everybody it's not going to rain today. She's not wrong. I'm not wrong. But the thing is, it was just about that interpretation. We're not saying the same thing word for word, but we are saying the same thing in the sense of, you know, trying to get the weather report out there. So Larry, I see he's driving right now. How you doing, Larry? Larry and I, we spoke. Isn't that right? Yeah, I can't hear him right now. But Larry and I spoke, and
Yep.
you know, I looked at his resume just the other day, and I forwarded it to the recruiter. While you can't decide who is going to read and interpret your resume for the jobs that they have, one of the great things about many companies out there is that they have somebody like myself that will push the resume forward to the recruiter, to the scout, or to the hiring manager on your behalf as a veteran. So I transitioned to this. I'm using Larry as an example because he's the most recent one and he's on the screen. Is that many companies, not just Adobe, Adobe's very new to this. Matter of fact, when I got hired to Adobe, they said we are way behind the power curve on this. We do not have a military veteran guru at all. And I wear different hats. So I'm the branding guy. I'm trying to lead veterans to Adobe. I don't have requisitions per se, but I want to be the advocate, not just on behalf of Adobe, but for veterans. And Larry's the example of where I took his resume and I started extracting a few points to get forward to the recruiter and actually get the recruiter not on the phone, but we use Slack, if you're familiar with Slack. We use Slack and broke it down and say, hey, here's the details, and here's a little bit more than what's on Larry's resume. And here's the value behind the training that he's currently getting at Salesforce. Kind of like the same thing I did with Bruno. And it really just comes down to
Sales Platoon, brother.
taking that extra time to say, hey, you know what, you're giving me extra information here, Dean. I really appreciate that. I say that in the sense to, regardless of where your path is going to take you and wherever you go, if you can find that veteran advocate of the company, whether it's Adobe, Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, government, non-government, public sector, the whole 9 yards, you find out who that advocate is. And if there's someone that will really open up and just give you the bottom line on how they could help, take advantage of that. Because they're going to do something behind the scenes that you're not even going to be aware of. But with all of that happening, it comes down to the requirements that need to be met. And Bruno knows the location. Okay. In order for a resume to go forward through the process, there's certain things that need to happen. So if you leave out of here and you finish and you graduate Sales Platoon, regardless of the job that you're going to go into, or regardless of the job that you're going to move into 5 years from now, 3 years from now, everything has to align with what the company is looking for. We hear a lot of stuff about remote opportunities out there, and there are a lot of remote opportunities out there in the continental United States, well, around the world. But there's a lot of on-site requirements. For example, the company that I work for right now, the BDRs, the business development representatives, because of where we're recruiting them from, and because they have a hierarchy of leadership needs to watch them, it requires on-site work. You know, well, I'm fully capable of doing the same thing remote. Well, there are requirements by certain companies that want on-site work. There are companies out there that require you to go in on a hybrid scale. Those are questions that you need to ask. Okay, those are questions that you're going to need to find out. When I was transitioning out of the Army, I did not know that I needed to ask more questions than receiving the information. I didn't know that I needed to ask a lot of questions, because if you're not asking, there's a lot of things that you're not going to find out about. So you got to ask those questions sooner rather than later. Now, this is kind of informal, this whole thing. I wanted to give you just a little bit of my background. Again, started off as a Rambo, came into talent acquisition, transitioned in Adobe, give you a little bit of what I think is the most important thing is the context of your resume. The context and that tailoring of your resume is the most important thing. I would like to open it up for any questions that you have, because I'll tell you this, I'm more of a listener and I try to take action than I am a talker. And so I want to give you the opportunity now to ask any questions of anything that I may not have covered. If you want to talk about my transition, how I went through TAP, some of the things that I learned along the way, how important networking is, how important it is to look at the job boards of particular companies, how important, whatever it may be, I'm open ears right now, and I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Dean. I appreciate that overview. And yeah, they're all waking up here, and I'm sure we'll get a bunch of hands raised here soon on that. So I'll see some popping up already, which is good. But as we do that, one of the things that, guys, this is, what Dean's doing is echoing a lot of what, we said, hey, if you're looking for how am I going to find my next role, you're the fish in the ocean looking for water. You're doing it right now. Sales is you're learning how to prospect. You're learning to go and find those roles that are open and be very diligent about filling them. I think, Dean, one of the things before we go to Bruno's question, I'd like you to touch on, you've been in the civilian world long enough now. One of the challenges I think, and I'm going to actually do probably 2 workshops coming up here. One I'd like to invite you to, well, probably both, but one of them is around our military making the transition out and the challenges they have. And it's this mindset of, if I've been in 4, 8, 12, 20, especially 20 plus years, I'm used to having a career planner that I'm going from one station to the next. There's a job and a billet for me that somebody's already looked at. They know it's going to be available in a year and a half or in 9 months. That's not the way civilians corporations work. It's like more like popcorn. You just don't know what position tomorrow the VP of sales could resign from, George. It's different. And that's a different mindset to think about, because it's like, well, these billets that are open, they're not always going to be open in the civilian world. They're just a moment in time. And sometimes by the time they're advertised, they're already filled. And that's why you talk about networking. It's not a bad word. And can you talk about that a little bit before we, like, the difference in how civilian planners look at things versus, what we did in the military?
Yeah, so in the military, there's a lot of copy and paste of success that the military has learned from corporate America, and then not so much vice versa. Goes along with the talent development in line. But in the military, you have a higher attrition percentage than you do in the civilian market. Okay. And our attrition, it's normal attrition, not the unforecasted attrition, but in the military, the normal attrition rate and flow is what is normally used for setting up for that next rank, for that next position. Whether it's a requirement to move duty stations or whether it's a requirement for obtaining the next rank, those are forecasted, and those are forecasted years out. And before you get into a current fiscal year, the adjustments are made. Same on the line of the corporate America, but the percentage of the normal attrition is a lot lower. We all have established termination dates in the military, right? We are all exiting out at some point, or we have signed a DD Form 4 to say we're extending our length. That's that re-enlistment document that we all use in the military, or the extension, that DD Form 4, which, by the way, is interpreted out here as an offer letter, right? Okay. But the attrition, the normal attrition is a lot different. So you're not going to have somebody just put it in their request to exit out and put a 2 weeks notice in the military. That's not happening. That's not happening at all. But once somebody goes into a medical status, because they're possibly going to exit out for medical reasons, okay, when they put their retirement paper in, okay, now we have a forecast. Now we have a possible forecast for a possible disability or an exit out because of medical reasons. We have a possible forecast because of X, Y, and Z, but that's all part of the normal attrition that's accounted for in the military. In the civilian world, I can put my 2-week notification in and then be gone and jump onto another opportunity out there, and that is not counted as normal attrition within the company that I'm in. And so these opportunities, it is like popcorn. They come and go. And these opportunities in many corporations, they're going to be sold internally as well as externally. And internally is those, I'll use Adobe as an example. When we put our requisitions out, they're going internally to see if we can get that upward movement from somebody. So, we got Leah here. We'll see, if Leah is in Adobe and she's a BDR, and we had a customer success manager put something out. Now Leah is going to go ahead and submit for the role, look at the opportunities, go through the interview process, the whole 9 yards, see if the promotion is there, however it may work through the talent development line, and then fill that opportunity. At the same time, that opportunity, while it's running, is now getting posted on the job board that Nikki is looking at. Nikki's now looking at that opportunity saying, oh, they're looking for somebody and I'm going to submit for this job. Nikki doesn't know that Leia is already going through the motions for that job. And just in case if it doesn't work out for Leia, then Nikki's going to go ahead and possibly be one of those candidates that can move forward. Patrick, the following week, the job is still posted. Patrick's putting in his resume. Patrick's like, got all this experience. Let's just say he's been out for 5 years and has got all this experience. Well, Leia, she goes through the interviewing process. Nikki, she just gets cut. Patrick jumps to the top. Now Patrick's getting looked at to get hired because now they've got him basically being seen as a seasoned customer success manager. So they don't hire internally. They end up knocking off Nikki. And then Patrick ends up getting the job, and he was the last one to submit for the role. And that's how this all comes around. So it's popcorn. So it's not just popcorn in the sense of when the role pops up, it's also with the candidates as they come in and as they're seen and as they're sourced. I could have Patrick come in, he could be the top guy, but we also have a talent sourcer or a talent scout that is searching for the replacement, okay, for this customer success manager role. Then all of a sudden the talent scout turns in the day after Patrick turns in his resume. We'll go back to Bruno. Bruno's resume is now in, and he's got more experience, and he's actually worked on some properties that we're looking at. Now he gets the job. And so it's not just about the timing. It's because, you know, first in doesn't mean you're the first one to get the shot. You know, so when a job posts and it's been out there 24 hours, it doesn't mean that you're the first one in. Many of these jobs out here in corporate America, you know, we'll see 150, 200 to 1,000 people submitted for one role. It's amazing. We have some roles out there that we won't get anybody submit for because they're just so hard to fill based off of qualifications. But take, for instance, the roles that you guys are looking at. If you stay in this on the sales side, there's going to be plenty of roles, plenty of opportunities out there. And it goes back to, you don't get to decide who the recruiter is that's interpreting your resume. You don't get to decide who the hiring manager is that's reading your resume to make the decision to move you to the next line. And that's why it's so critical that context and tailoring your resume is very important to each and every one of you out there. Because if you're not talking the talk of what they're looking for, then it's not going to match up. And you may be the most qualified person. Patrick may be the most qualified. Lonnie can be the most qualified. I mean, look at Lonnie's stuff. He's hiring heroes. He's got 26 years, superintendent operations training guru at the United States Air Force. I'm looking at Lonnie's LinkedIn profile right now. And he may have all of this experience, but if that resume does not say what we are looking for, corporate America or public government, whatever the job is not aligning with what we're looking for, it really doesn't matter. It's just going to get pushed to the side. It's very key to have that tailored resume.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And Bruno, we'll kick it over to you for a question.
Okay. Thank you. Dean, thanks a lot for coming and speaking to our cohort today. It's nice to somewhat face-to-face meet you instead of just on messaging on LinkedIn. I really appreciate your support that you gave me. Just so everybody knows, reaching out to folks on LinkedIn, networking is something that I know we've all been taught and Riley reinforces here in class. But the response that I got from Dean within 2 minutes was send me your resume, and the very next day I was contacted by Brandon, a recruiter, and I'm pretty confident if the location would have lined up, it would have led to at least to an interview. And so I'm very appreciative of that. And thanks for all the knowledge too about the resumes. You're absolutely right. Tailoring it to each job, it's very time consuming. It's a lot of work, but it's part of the job searching. So you just have to put the work in. The question I have is, in dealing with recruiters, and you touched on it a little bit, what's the difference between a recruiter and a talent sourcer / scout?
Okay. Yeah, so talent scouts, so stick with me here. You see how I like to use my hands a little bit here, and I don't have any slides, so I'm not using slides. Talent scouts, so think of a hierarchy in recruiting. I mean, look at Tina's background. She's got the Eiffel Tower back there, right? So down at the bottom where Tina's shoulders are at on this screen, now she's moving. You have the scouts. So you have a line like this of scouts that are looking for, they are the searchers. And these are also known as sourcers. Okay, so talent sourcers, talent scouts, people that are in search of candidates to fill specific roles. They are the searchers. They're not hunters per se, like headhunters. We should have gotten rid of that title, and it's not even an official title, but scouts and sourcers are the ones that are looking for specific candidates for specific roles. And in a lot of times, it's their more hard to fill roles that they're always focusing on versus the ones that are always going to see an even flow coming in. The next line, so as you go through the Eiffel Tower, right in the middle there is going to be your recruiters, your talent partners. Okay, they're your recruiters. Now in Adobe, they're called talent partners and not recruiters because they have an interaction with the hiring team directly, hand in hand, as if they have that dotted line. They actually work for them and they know everything that's going on within that role, where recruiters always don't have that. Sometimes they have another hierarchy in the recruiting line, and then like in Amazon, I came from Amazon, they had the client lead recruiter that was working with the actual hiring manager. But just think of those two. You have the scouts, the sourcers, they're the ones that are looking for you to fill the role. Okay, and then the recruiters are the ones that are selling you to the hiring team. And they're going to work out all the details if it comes to the interviews. They're going to be working with the recruiting coordinator. Probably the most important person in the process that doesn't get enough credit is the recruiting coordinators, who work all of the actions behind the scenes, getting you to the interviews, making sure information is being flown through from the candidate to the recruiter to the hiring manager, and getting everything set up. And in some companies, the offer letters are sent out by recruiting coordinators, and other companies are sent out by the recruiters. I believe here in Adobe, they're actually sent out by the recruiting coordinators in tandem with the recruiter. But those are the three major persons that are in line with the recruiting process.
Okay,
Did that answer your question, Bruno?
Yeah, it definitely did. Yeah.
I don't like the term talent scouts. I like sourcers. It's not that I don't like scouts, it's just that I'm more used to sourcers. And over here in Adobe, they're called talent partners, which I think are fine, but I would like it. I'm just more used to the term recruiters. Again, I think words matter, context matters, things, and so what everybody else is doing is, what we should be doing. Yeah. Patrick, you got a question?
Yes, sir. Hey, good morning, Dean. How you doing?
Good morning.
Hey, sorry. My question is, so I'm having a little difficulty on this one because I appreciate you talking about the resume piece, because that's something that I'm actually in the process of trying to figure out. So it's basically like I spent 25 years being an 11 Bravo. I got a degree in journalism. Now I want to be a 25 Victor. Like, how do I, now that I have this small amount of education in sales, how do I take my 25 plus years worth of program management skill set? Because if I was going to be a program manager, my resume is written perfectly for that, because that's what I've been doing for 25 years. How do I take my little bit of education I've had so far in sales and then translate that, all that program management, into a specific resume like you're talking about for a sales job, but I don't have any experience in sales? I have the degrees and all that other business, but there's no like prior job of sales, right? This would be my
So what you're doing is what's called a career shift. Okay. when you're doing something in the military and you're going for something that's completely different than what you really have that background in from the military, it's just a career shift. And there's a lot of humility that needs to come with a career shift. And I will just be upfront with y'all on this. Okay. So when you're doing a career shift and you're making X number of dollars, you got to realize those X number of dollars and that job title and what you're going to be doing is all going to change. And when you come in earlier and you accept that change, it's going to be a lot easier to understand where you're going to start from. When I left out, I ran the entire Army program. I ran programs, and I came out and I was just a recruiter when I started. And I was like, wow, I'm a recruiter. I'm not a senior manager. I'm not directing anything. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And I came out and I was working in a profession that was similar to what I was doing in the military. And so a lot of humbleness had to come through to understand that it was about getting my foot in the door. Patrick, that's what this is. You're going to have to get your foot in the door. And if you're looking for those not quite entry-level roles, but they're the junior entry-level roles in sales, in Adobe, they are the business development representatives. That's that first line sales role that we have here in Adobe. They may be titled differently in Microsoft or some other company out there, but it's that first line role. Getting this training that you have is probably the most valuable thing that you're going to need, because a company like Adobe, the great thing about that is that we're looking for the intangibles and not for the tangibles. Okay, so your 2 years of experience that you think you may need for a company like Adobe, you don't need in order to get to that interview stage with us. And that's what's great. And I say that because I can speak on behalf of Adobe, but let me be realistic. You're looking for a job, period, wherever that may be. You're going to find that same opportunity with other companies. So these entry level, junior level jobs in sales, okay, they're looking more for, or it should be, the intangibles versus what you have experience wise. So when you write up this resume, look at that job requirement. Here, I'll pull one up real quick, and I'm not going to bring it up on the screen. Are you learning anything about cold calling right now? Yeah, okay. So sets meeting through cold calling, inbound leads, and net new prospects. See, once you start lining that up with what you're being trained on, even though you don't have the experience, you can just put that in there and it'll line up very well, especially for these beginning sales roles. So I would still leave your resume with all of your program management background, probably remove some of the context in there because of volume. Anything that leads to experience that would align with sales, regular engagement. Okay, you have to do that in program management. That's a key thing you would want to keep in there, because then it's going to easily translate to sales. Generating, new programs, okay, or implementing new tools. Those are key things that may be able to transition into the sales type role.
Is there any way to, so I actually feel like I'm selling all the time anyway. Like I'm always trying to sell a commander or a general officer into doing something that I think is a good idea. Is there any specific way to articulate that to a civilian resume?
Well, I think if I give you the answer, it could be different for Lonnie and it could be different for Tika. I think because like I said, we have so many similar, but there's so many different jobs that we do. I like to look at things individually. So what I would open up to you is that if you wanted to send me your resume, I could highlight and actually show you what would line up for these types of roles, because the experience that you have on what you've been selling commanders, right? What you've been advising commanders on and telling them what needs to happen, it really comes into that word of play. And so you advising based off of maintenance versus Tika advising off of, I'll just infantry, okay, because we know she's in the infantry, okay. And then Van Michael here, you know, we know he's flying planes, so advising off of, you know, flying through the clouds. And I say that jokingly, Van. But I think it comes into what the individual experience is. So if you wanted to send me your resume and actually say, hey, what on my past experience would align into that sales, then I could easily highlight that for you and send it right back.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I will tell you this about resume experts. Everybody's heard resume experts. If you're out there on LinkedIn, everybody's got a resume expert. Everybody calls themselves a resume expert. And until you look at that one individual's resume, you cannot give the advice that is really needed. It's good to give holistic advice, but really the details of that really comes on that one-on-one interaction. That's very important. And you don't need to go to people to pay for, you know, to do your resume. When you have a network of people and you send it out to 5 people, you're going to end up having a nice solid resume at the end of the day. You know, how many of you have heard that your resume can be no more than 2 pages long? Yeah, the wrong answer. You know, the right answer is how much experience do you have that translates over to the job that you're going to be submitting for? So if you're looking for something that is young and junior, yeah, your resume is going to be 1 or 2 pages. But if you're in the technical field, if you're going to be a software engineer, I'll just use that as an example. We got no software engineers here, but a software engineer on the recruiting side, if we saw a resume that was 2 pages long, we'd be throwing that to the file 13 immediately, because we would already know that that person wouldn't have enough experience and doesn't have enough technical skills because they don't have enough stuff written on their resume. And so it's set down to the experience and that tailoring and that context of the resume, just like I said before. So when you're hearing that, listen to it and see if it applies to you. But if not, it's okay to add more, versus more is better than less. So any other questions?
Thanks, Dean. As we wait, I'm sure we'll get at least one more. Oh, there you go, Patrick.
Dean,
So,
I just want to just caveat to what you just talked about. Like everything I've heard in the last 12 to 13 months 12 to 18 months has been the complete inverse of what you just said, that more is not better, less is better. Could you just expound upon that a little bit? I mean, I'm hearing it from every other source except for what you're saying today. Not that I'm thinking that they're right and you're wrong. It's just, I'm just curious about your take on it, because my resume is actually 3 pages long. And everybody tells me it's too long. So
yeah, well, we just hired probably within this last week, you know, and people can change their resumes all the time. Three is about right. You know, if you've got 9 years of service in and you're gonna go for a junior job, you can do it. You know, you can do it in 1 page. It really comes down to the experience that you have and how that is tailored and relates to the job that you were going for. I would tell anybody, if you got 30 years of military experience and you're going for a business development representative role, you can make that 1 or 2 pages. Yes. But if you were going out there and you had 30 years of experience, or if you had 10 years of experience and 5 years of that is as a current business development representative, then you're looking at 2 to 3 pages as you're trying to become an account executive on a certain product or platform. It could be 3 pages. My resume right now, and it always has been, 3 pages. It's actually 2.5 pages, but because it's on the 3rd page, it's on the 3rd page. And I've never changed it. And I've been told by all of these experts it was too long. It needs to be 2 pages. It needs to be 1 page so they can flip the front and back. And I'm like, look, I got 2 hands. That's 4 pages. I can look front and back, front and back. You know, I come from a world where I've worked on technical and non-technical roles. So in Amazon, I would see those that would want to be operation managers for the facilities that deliver all of our stuff. Okay, resumes from 2 to 5 pages. None of them are wrong. People with 2 pages would get the job. People with 5 pages would get the job. It really just comes down to the context on how that relates to the role and the experience that's put in there. If it's more of a technical role, as I stated, and if it wasn't more than 2 pages and they were highly experienced, then you didn't have enough context in there. And that's just because there's so many technical aspects that should be on a resume for those types of roles versus an HR generalist. An HR generalist can get to the bottom line up front and have it as a 1 page. A CEO can have it as 1 page. But what your job is to get the next job. And that context, all right, and tailor it to the job in which you're looking for is key. And if it leads you to a 3rd page, then it's going to lead you to a 3rd page. I'm not right. I'll tell you this, Patrick. I'm not right, and I'm not wrong. And anyone out there, all these experts, they're not right, and they're not wrong. And it's because the answers of everyone that is getting jobs today has a 1-pager, a 2-pager, a 3-pager, a 4-pager, a 5-page resume today, and they're getting jobs. And we can't say that the 1 and 2 pagers were wrong, and we can't say the 3, 4, 5, or even more pagers were wrong, or vice versa. As long as it lines up with the job, and we understand that the context that matters is in there, you'll be good to go.
Yeah, and that's the, as we kind of come to our end of the time here today, I think that's one of the things to keep in mind is, look, you're doing a career shift. Most of you, we're going to leave. You're going to go into something that the military doesn't do, which is produce revenue. We capture land, we win wars, but we don't produce revenue. We get revenue from Congress. We get money, and then we spend it. It's been that way since the Revolutionary War. So we're completely changing the way that we change business, and you're going to change roles. My resume right now, to Dean's point, if a sales platoon, I decided to fold it up and go out, is about 4.5 pages. Because when I'm looking at roles, I would be looking at very senior VP of sales roles with very specific turnaround requirements in a mid-sized company. And they're going to want to see what I specifically did at each one of those if they're evaluating me. But you know what? I'm probably not going to get that job by sending my resume in. Because, again, there's all these experts, they play the numbers. It's the reason you don't see any sales training for VPs of sales, because it's too small of an opportunity and there's not enough money in it. Everybody wants to say that they're going to help you get a job, but there's a huge difference when you go in and get a logistics job and you want to go get an operations job where you're heading a logistics team, and then you go on into a sales logistics role. And it's going to be networking your way in, which is what we're going to be doing and have been doing most of the cohort. So, it's really that resume. I always think of it as kind of like a dating profile. It's like, whatever you're putting out there is what they're going to see, and they don't know what you don't tell them about. So, if it's important for you to attract, I don't know, my strange analogies, you guys know, but if you want to attract a certain type of person, you put yourself out there in a really nice car in a really nice place. You want to attract something else, you're going to talk about your history degree. So just depends upon what you're going to put out there. So I use a lot of weird analogies, Dean. They're used to them. You're probably not yet. There's a lot of dating analogies. I think there's a lot of similarities. I don't see any other hands. So one of the things I'd like, Dean, hey, we usually, when we have these times together, and I'd love to get you, be a regular coming out. We got our next cohort starting in January, but for now, we got a couple minutes, and it's like, we're going to hang up. This may be, other than them, I'm sure they're going to reach out today. You'll probably get a bunch of LinkedIn connection requests. But other than that, anything you would want to leave them with about their search and their transition and where they're going, just based on your own experience, anything you think we didn't talk about today?
Yeah, the biggest thing is not giving up. There is a bright side to all of this, so you'll finish this training, you'll transition out, because you're all on this, I think you're all on the fellowship right now, with Hiring Our Heroes. You'll go back, you'll transition out, you're going to hear a lot of great recommendations and a lot of great advice. You take what applies to you. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences. There's not one person in here, and I've looked at quite a few profiles on LinkedIn that have LinkedIn accounts I was able to find. And so your job journey is not going to be the same as Patrick's journey is not going to be the same as Lucas, and Lucas is not going to be the same as Larry, and then Ming Ling is not going to be the same as Dusty's, and then and jumping around, it's not going to be the same. And that's because your journey is not like it was when you entered in, where if all of us were together and we were at the MEPS, our journey is going to be the same. We're going to go to basic training, and then we're going to split out and go to advanced training to learn that skill that the government's going to pay us to learn. We're going to go out now and do things individually, and we're not going to go to basic training. We're not going to go to advanced training. Well, you're going to training right now, but you see what I'm saying? You're not going to be going into a specific company like that. So your journey is going to be different. Just don't give up. I lost a fellow Ranger buddy of mine transitioning, and it was very hard. Very hard. And it's just one of those things where what could we have done better? And this happened many years ago. And the thing is that we just got to pump up each other and be there for each other and say, hey, look, it's going to work out. But you're coming at a time right now where I got to tell you, the opportunities, they're endless. They're endless. There is something out there for you that's going to fit right for you. But just be humble with that, in the sense that, well, I want to make 6 figures. I want to make, a high 5 figures. Well, you know what? You may come a little bit lower. You may come a little bit higher. Everything's going to be about those opportunities. But take it and get in. What I've always told people is that when you're going in for that first sales job, you're not going to be there forever. You produce, you're going to go to that next one. Before you know it, the carrots are just going to be right out in front of you, and you're just going to be chasing them like crazy. So just ride with it. Start the ride as anybody else would start it, and the potential is limitless. But don't give up. That's my biggest recommendation. On top of context, tailoring your resumes.
Yeah. Something to be said for that. It's you don't want to be in a marathon with no finish line. So you gotta tailor it. So we're gonna actually get the Dean. I couldn't have teed it up better today. I really appreciate you coming out, meeting with these guys. We recorded this. I hope that's okay. I forgot to tell you ahead of time. We usually use it internally. We don't post it anywhere. I didn't do a Facebook Stripe or anything this time, because there's people that couldn't make it today. They were, VA appointments or doing checkout or whatever. So don't know if you want a copy of it. You're welcome to have it if you want it. Otherwise, it'll never see anywhere.
No, that's good. Yeah, this was informal. This
Right.
wasn't followed by an outline or anything like that, or a resume or a template. This was just, Riley and I getting together saying, hey, and I said, yeah, throw me in Monday. Yeah, definitely be there. Let's just talk. The biggest thing is very open. Patrick already said to you, but I offer this to everyone. Hey, take a look at my resume. I'll take a look at it. I always have time on the weekends. It's Monday now, but I always have time for somebody else to look at it. And I won't rewrite anything, but I'll just give you, just one person's advice. But you got to take the advice of many, not just one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Riley.
Good stuff. We really appreciate it. All right. Well, take care, Dean. We already took too much of your time this morning, but
Oh no, that's
appreciate
okay.
your help.
Appreciate it.
All right. We'll
Take care.
talk soon.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, guys. So we are 10:33. Take a quick break. We'll come back at 1100. Lonnie's going to lead us through the survey that we'd gotten that we didn't touch on last week. It takes about 45 minutes to complete, so don't start it if you can't finish it in that setting. the goal is from 11 to 11:50 to get it done, or at least for you guys to start it. But if you can't start it, please don't start it, because you cannot go back to it. It's kind of like one of those ASVAB tests. So letting you know, it's a little bit longer in the culture index, but it's a retired sergeant major. It's his. I don't know if it's. I don't think he created it. I think he just either works there, whatever. But he gave us a free link for it. So it's essentially, what should I do when I grow up? So could be an interesting survey for us all to take to see where aptitude lies, and something we can use. So, all right, so we're on break.